Lisa arrived. We've got to talk about it. Combo breaker. We've got a couple surprises, a couple returns coming through. How you doing today?
I am great. We get a U.S. women's national team roster. It's all coming together. Who knew the end of March would be so exciting with the start of the NWSL, and now internationally it is the build up to the World Cup. And we knew these friendlies were coming. We knew that we would see hopefully some more names, right? A bigger roster than perhaps what Vlatko Andonovski is hoping to take to the World Cup in Australia and New Zealand in just a few months. But I don't think this is what anyone expected to see on the roster. 26 players, some names returning to this one, some usual suspects as always, but there's so much to get into here. I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it. Thank goodness you're here and I get to chat with you about this and I get to pick your brain on it, because otherwise I'd be talking to a wall. So welcome everyone to Attacking Third. We're so happy to have you all here.
I'm happy to have you here. I was like, listen, I gotta put this somewhere. All this energy that I've got here, like where am I gonna put it? I'm gonna put it all on A3 and chat about it with my friend and colleague Lisa Roman. I look, we've got to just start with the full 26 player roster. It's going to be 23 players that are available for match day, but 26 players called into training camps for a pair of April friendlies that will begin on Saturday, April the 8th, kicking off in Austin, Texas, and then concluding on Tuesday, April 11th in St. Louis. So let's chat about who we might see over the 2-match series. For the goalkeepers, we've got Adriana Franch, Casey Murphy, and Alyssa Nair. Defenders, 10 of them. Alana Cook, Tierna Davidson, Emily Fox, Crystal Dunn, Naomi Girma, Sofia Huerta, Casey Kruger, Kelly O'Hara, Becky Sauerbrunn, and Emily Sonnet. Midfielders with 7 listed: Julie Ertz, Lindsay Horan, Taylor Korniak, Rose Lavelle, Christy Mewis, Ashley Sanchez, and Andy Sullivan. And for the forward core, it is 6 players: in Ashley Hatch, Alex Morgan, Trinity Rodman, Sophia Smith, Mallory Swanson, and Lynn Williams. Let's maybe chat a little bit about the familiar faces returning to this roster. We have seen a certain collection of players called in over the course of specific international windows, most recently in 2023, the New Zealand camp that took place in January, and then the February window, which held the She Believes Cup. A lot of players from those 2 most recent camps. So there's maybe not a ton of surprises there. Let's say roughly 85% of this roster or so is full of names and faces that at this point, if you've been following the women's national team, are not unfamiliar to you. Even if it's, starting at the top with the goalkeepers and in French and Murphy and Nair. We have seen this trio in national team camps for several months now. Defenders, I think, is an area which we are starting to see that rotation kind of change a little bit. We talked about really over the course of the last 18 months, 2 years, it feels like, with the absence of players due to extended injury or players making their return from pregnancy and maternity leave. What is this player pool going to look like as the World Cup gets closer and closer and closer? And we're starting to see that here. I think we're starting to see players who are returning to form and getting back into these national team camps. And even with this defender core, which of course it's A3, so we're going to start with goalkeepers and defenders, we're starting to see that. But doesn't really look like there's been a ton of rotation of players out of this pool, but more just the addition, right? We're watching the return of Crystal Dunn, but we're also seeing players like Sonnet returning to fitness as well. But there's more surprises in the midfield and maybe even in the forward core. But I would still consider somebody like Sophia Smith a reoccurring cast member, I think, for this team. How about you?
Yeah, I think I agree completely. I mean, no surprises at all in the goalkeeping core between Adie Franch, Casey Murphy, Alyssa Nair. I mean, these are the players that have had the most consistency over the last several months with this team, with this roster. And now that club play is starting in the NWSL, we're only going to get more and more consistency from these keepers. And like you and I have talked about, Alyssa Nair, in our eyes, is the number one keeper. But I do believe that there's a battle for that number 2 spot between Franch and Murphy. And it's friendlies like these against Ireland and in just months before the World Cup that hopefully some of those details will be ironed out, or at least a little bit more solidified. But frankly, the competition, you want that there to constantly be pushing for number 2. If that spot's open, the 2 players that have the option to take that number 2 spot are going to battle even harder. It'll push Alyssa Nair harder. But 10 defenders being called into this one, Sandra. That's a heck of a lot of defenders, especially when there are 4 on the pitch. Maybe we get 6 during a 90-minute game when there's 2 subs rotation. But that, to me, says that not a lot of positions are locked up in that back line. I think that centrally, when you look at the roster between Alana Cook, Becky Sauerbrunn, Naomi Girma, those are players that have locked up center back roles. Maybe there's still a little discourse about who's going to get the start, and maybe that comes down to match. But Tierna Davidson getting back into that center back, that pairing as well, that's 4. And that to me is a solid core to have as your center backs. But then you look at this, there's Emily Fox, Crystal Dunn, Sophia Huerta, Casey Kruger, Kelly O'Hara, and Emily Sonnet, all options at the outside back. I don't foresee Vlatko Andonovski taking 10 defenders to the World Cup. So I think there are some question marks as to how he narrows that down. And obviously being called into this April camp, that's a point and a reason to do that. But it's all usual suspects at this point. It almost makes the bubble even bigger.
I was going to say, I think it's an important point that you make about the timeline of this, right? So there were effectively 4-ish months away from the World Cup at this point in terms of the buildup. And when we're looking at the games that are going to, that are left remaining for this national team, this is it. So this is the announcement with the roster dropping earlier this morning. They've repeated that a few times. Initially when they announced Ireland as the opponent, and now once more when they announced the roster, that this pair of friendlies is the final set of international friendlies before the final World Cup roster is going to be announced. So that means that these 2 matches combined with elevated club play are going to be the possible final factors for some players in making their push for a spot on Andonovski's World Cup roster. So I think, we just had an opening weekend of NWSL, and I would anticipate that from through the duration of April through May, possibly the beginning of June, there's going to be a number of United States Women's National Team coaching staff members who are taking a look at various NWSL matches in terms of player performances, because that timeline, that window is closing every week that goes by.
Really, those are the only opportunities besides, right, this camp getting called in and then just 2 friendlies over the span of a couple of days in April. But otherwise, coaches on the international level have to be watching club play across the board. This is globally at this point. They have to be watching club play to just see more consistently how the players that they're evaluating are playing in various roles and positions. But that's a massive thing. Vlatko Andonovski will be seen at various stadiums in NWSL land over the next couple of weeks because he has to evaluate these players.
I mean, look, I saw that he was at some of the games this weekend. I think he was taking in the big West Coast versus East Coast match.
We should have added that to our NWSL bingo board. Spot Vlatko Andonovski at a match.
See Andonovski at an NWSL game. That's true. Maybe that could be like a bonus square for players who are playing along with that. But it's already started, right? The check-ins have already started. And it's going to be it's going to be quite the buildup to this World Cup, because honestly, I can't believe it's already going to be April. Like you and I are chatting together right now, doing this episode at the end of March on the 28th, and just a few days, it's already going to be April. So these friendlies are approaching much quicker, I think, than people can actually, realize. But I think with the added announcements and the added layers of new faces returning after quite some time, and some players getting rotated out, that kind of maybe causes the blur a little bit in terms of perspective.